Well, welcome back to another module in my crash course on scripting here. Anyways, we're going to do this one. It was supposed to be just loops, but it's going to be logic and loops. Because as you can see down there, the subheading kind of long in the tooth. But I forgot to do the if and then in the logic module. So we're going to go ahead and throw it in here, as it's important to cover. And my cat keeps liking to interrupt my presentations here. But it's okay. But anyways, so after we're done with the little logic there, we're going to go ahead and do some loops. So I want you to hold on to your barf bags, because we're going to do some loops that'll make roller coasters envious, as I put there. Yeah, my humor's not that good, but, I'm a dad, so dad humor. It's an important thing. I've earned the right. I reproduced. So we're going to recap the logic module from last time first. And I think this is how we're going to do this each module going forward. We're going to do a little recap of the previous one, just to refresh those memories a little bit there. Anyways, so the other one, the logic module, we covered the operands that were used in logic. First one was the and operand, and basically, again, just to reiterate, that means that all statements connected with an and statement have to be true in order for the entire statement to be true. So, like this one here, Gwen Stefani is a solo artist, and Gwen was a member of No Doubt, and that is obviously true. Anyways, there, and so as you can see, there's just a recap of what I mentioned a moment there about all statements must be true to have the entire statement be true. Then we have the or operand, and in this one we see No Doubt saying Love Fool, or Stefani was a judge on The Voice. Well, in this case, No Doubt did not sing Love Fool, although I am one person who thought that they did for the longest time. But that was not No Doubt. And Stefani, on the other hand, Gwen Stefani, was a judge on the TV show The Voice. I don't know if she still is, but she was at one point in time. So because one of those is true and it's connected by an or, the entire statement is true. And in this case, we're going to say exactly one or more statements joined by the or operand must be true for the overall statement to be true. Then we did the exclusive or. In this case, we stick down here. My example was the Cardigans sang Love Fool, which that is true. That is the group that actually sang Love Fool. Exclusive or, Love Fool was in the movie Cruel Intentions. That statement is false because Love Fool was in the movie Cruel Intentions. I love that movie. If anybody else hasn't seen it, I suggest you go see it. It is a 90s update to kind of a more classic movie, which I can't think the name of it right now. But to a classic kind of movie that was made a few times. But it's an awesome movie, anyways. But Love Fool was in that movie, was played in a scene where Ryan Philippe's character is trying to woo his ex-wife. There, what's her name now? She's in Legally Blonde. What was her name again? Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon's character in that movie. By in Anyways, I digress. But anyways, in an exclusive or statement, in an exclusive or situation, only one statement joined by the exclusive or can be true for the overall statement to be true. Otherwise, if more than one of the statements in any statement connected by exclusive or are true, then the entire statement as a whole is false. Additionally, if they're all false, then it also still evaluates to false. And then we have not. So not here is basically the negation of something again, as we mentioned in the previous module. In this case, I'm saying not Antitrust, the movie stars Ryan Phillippe. I think he's a good actor. Happened to be on my brain when I put this together. But that's false because it's true that Ryan Phillippe was the star of the movie Antitrust. That's also a very good movie if you're kind of a tech geek in particular. I would recommend it. But anyways, I'm basically negating whatever that statement in the parentheses is. So that's a true statement, but I'm negating it, so it means that the whole statement is, equals out to a false. Anyways, as I mentioned, it negates a statement or qualifier. So let's move on. Oh, before we move on, I forgot I had this in here. Just kind of showing you here. You may recognize that diagram that just came up. It's called a Venn diagram. You may have seen them before. You may be familiar with them. But basically, these operands are how you get the different sections of those circles. You know, combinations of those different pieces in those things. I'm not really going to go into it. If you were to take a formal training, in particular, formal training to do with SQL and logic, you would probably see a lot more of that discussing how you would get the subsets of data in the various combinations that you see there. In terms of SQL, they'll talk about join statements and stuff where you're joining different data sets together to get cross-membered stuff in there. Anyways, so I just thought I'd have on there because that's kind of like what these operands are able to reveal, different data sets coming together to produce various outcomes there. So, revenge of the logic. We're going to talk about if, then, and else, which is what I should have covered last time but did not. And as we go here, with the operands, if, then, and else are the foundation of meaningful scripting. In other words, these are your logic behind our fundamental building block behind building the logic into a script. You can do a script, obviously, that's going to be very linear. It's going to operate and do just specific tasks. An example of that might be something pretty basic. Let's say you were to, we'll talk about PowerShell for a minute. Let's say you were to get a directory listing of files and folders using PowerShell, and then you just wanted to dump that out to a CSV file or a text file or something. You could easily do that without having to do any real logic. You just say, "Get me these files," and then run the export or write function to output that to a text file or to a CSV or whatever. There are a few different ways to do that in PowerShell, but we're not covering that right now. And of course, there's no if, then, or else or anything that's really logical in there. It's just a very linear script. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. But if we want to get more advanced with our scripting, especially if we want to look for different subsets of information, let's say we're looking for specific files or folders or specific files with certain sizes, then we might start look at using if, then, and else to be able to filter through that data and produce the results that we want. So an example here, though, is if I am 40 years old, then you can say I'm over the hill. Else if I'm under 3 years old or less than 3 years old, you could say I'm a bouncing baby. And then else, I am a spring chicken. Easier than falling off a log. How do you like that? So basically, we're going to recap this here. Basically, we have these three statements here. With an if, then, else statement, basically you're saying, if a condition, then do this, or then have this information. Or this means that this means this particular information. You can also have what we call an else if, which is basically, it's in the same if block, if you will. So the same if statement, but it's a different condition. So we're saying, if one condition is there, then if that's not the case, the next one's saying otherwise, if this condition is the case to that. And then lastly, we have the else there, which is if any of the previous conditions are not met, you're going to just do whatever is in the else. Now, you can have just an if statement without an else if or an else, in which case it's just like you just need to do this if this particular criteria is true, but you don't need to do anything else if that's not true. In other words, if that particular thing is true, do X, but if that's not true, you don't need to do anything else. So it would be just an if statement without an else or an else if. But anyway, so it's a pretty basic thing. It's easier than falling off a log there. So Revenge of the Logic Part 2. So this is going to be some examples here further. So we're going to combine some of this logic here, if, ands, and whatever. If I am 40 years old and I am home, then I go to bed at 2100 hours. Yeah, I'm old. I go to bed early. Else, if I am 40 or older and I'm at work, then I drink lots of coffee to stay awake. Yeah, I don't sleep very well, so coffee is my friend. Actually, no, I really don't drink coffee anymore. I think I overdosed in my younger years, and it doesn't have any effect on me now. Else, if I am 40 years old or older, and I have had a lot to drink, and that is not alcohol. When I put this together, I should have clarified that. But then I'm gonna have to find a bathroom frequently. Damn my prostate. What happened to the J there? It's supposed to be JK. I don't know. I must have screwed up. I don't know. It says K Jor am I? Don't know. Anyways, no. But yeah, I don't really actually have a prostate issue, but I do have to pee a lot for some reason. Um, yeah, especially if I drink a lot of fluids. But yeah. Else, if I am not 40, exclusive or I had plastic surgery, then flatter me with compliments of how young I look. So basically saying, if I'm under 40 or I had plastic surgery and I'm not under 40 and I have not had plastic surgery, so we're not going to do this. But if I had one of those, you could flatter me with the compliments of how young I look. And lastly, we're going to say else. Uh, you know, if I am 40 or older, if I don't meet any of this criteria, then I need to think about how, if I knew then what I know now, which I don't know. I didn't have anything there. But, we often say that in our older age. What is that? Hindsight's 2020. How things might have been different, right? But as you can see, so we combine some of these if statements and else if statements and then some of these operands together to produce different outcomes, you could say, to get different criteria and end up producing different results based on these criteria tests. So now we're going to talk about loops. I don't know. I must have screwed up this somehow. I don't know. Maybe I did something weird there. But for some reason, my subheadings came in, but the other ones didn't. Oh, I really screwed something up here. I don't know. Anyways, we have the for loop. It's great for iterating through a data set. Basically, it's really good. A for loop is good for iterating or going through individual items if you know how big that item set is or how many times you need to go through it. Woohoo! So my animations are here, but they're on the board oddly. I don't know what happened. Anyways, while is the next loop we're going to cover. But basically, while is to continue doing something again and again and again until a condition is false. So it's going to check a condition, and if that condition's true, it's going to execute whatever's in that while loop until that condition is false. This is great when you don't know how many times you're going to need to go through something. The other thing to mention about the while, this is a check on entry into the loop. So if the condition is not true when the while loop is to be, when the while loop starts, then whatever is in the while loop will never run to begin with. It just skips the entire while loop if the condition is not true when it gets to that while code entry. Woohoo! Spinning, spinning, spinning. Lastly, we have the do loop. There's two different types of do. There's do while and do until. So you might be wondering what's the difference between while and do. Well, it's basically, especially the do while, especially is, since they seem to do a very similar thing, the difference here is that the do will do the check on the exit or the end of the run, which means that it's going to execute whatever you have in that code at least one time. So basically, see here, do while, good for use with iteration, is unknown, but should be executed at least once. So if you have something you need to have done at least one time, whether or not the condition you're checking for is true or not, then you would use a do loop instead of a while loop. And of course, there's the do while and the do until. And essentially, the difference between these, the only real difference between these is you're going to continue doing what's in the do loop while a condition is true or until a condition is false, depending on which one you use. Or until, whatever the opposite is, or until it's true, whatever the case is, if you were to put them in that way. Ooh, Scooby Dooby Doo. Yeah, so these are supposed to come in one at a time, like my other slides. I really don't know what happened. I hope the rest aren't messed up. So, we're going to look at for example. So, we're going to say in a for loop, you're going to have basically an entry and an end. And so we see here the for each birthday from 1 to 18, and we see the end for down there. So whatever's between these two are going to be carried out. So for each birthday from 1 to 18, if we're going to do an if the birthday is 16 and I am a female, then we're going to throw a sweet 16 party and get our driver's license. I'm not female, so I didn't get a sweet 16. So hopefully any of you female watchers out there did. Then we're going to say else if the birthday is just 16, so there's no other qualifiers. Then we're going to say get a driver's license. Now you might ask, well, technically if I'm 16, couldn't I qualify for both of these? Yes, you could, obviously. But what you're doing here is if you do get like this if statement here, 16 and you're female, you're only going to execute what's in there, and then you're going to go down past your if statement. So you're not going to execute if you meet any of the other criteria below. So your most complex criteria should be the first checks you do, and make them more simpler as you go along. If you have checks that might have be able to test true for more than one, and more than one. And then, of course, for every birthday, we're going to eat cake and have a party from 1 to 18. So we're going to do those things for all our birthdays 1 to 18, and our 16th birthday is special because if we're for a woman, we get to have a sweet 16, and regardless of whether we're female or not, we get to get our driver's license, at least in most states. And of course, everybody loves cake and everybody loves a party. So, an example of while you watch. Again, just like the for, we have an entry and an exit there, so that's why we have the top and the bottom. So we're going to say while I am not 6 feet under, which for those of you not in the know, that is basically while I'm not buried in a grave and dead. If I'm not sick, then I'm going to enjoy life. And if I am sick, then I apparently can't spell, or is my screen? I don't know. That's just something my screen actually do say. But if I am not sick, or I'm sorry, if I am sick, I'm going to tell everyone not to take their health for granted. And I'm just going to overall, regardless of whether I'm sick or not, try not to think of my own mortality. And just live life. Doobie doobie doo, while I'm waiting, doobie doobie doo, until I'm fainting. I have no idea what that means. It's just nonsense, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone remembers that the doobie doobie. It used to be I think it was Coors Light commercials, if I remember correctly. Little Penguin used to sing that. Doobie doobie doo. But again, more of that dad humor there. Just trying to be funny, which I'm not. These are a couple of do examples here. So we see do browse network titles, or Netflix titles, while I can't find something to watch. So yeah, this would be an example where we need to execute this at least one time. We need to start browsing titles before I can find something that I want. So what we do is keep doing it and looking for it until we find something I want to watch. And then again, oh man, I don't know what I did with this. Woohoo! Might as well get these all done here. Whoa, there we go! Yay! Anyways, the other one is the other example, of course, is do daily commute to work until it's my day off. So yeah, so you can see, so that's kind of an example of those tests, and you can see the test goes at the end of the execution block. Um, Very similar to the while, it's just going to continue doing whatever's in there until that condition is met. So that would be the end of the slideshow here. I hope you've got something out of that, but to recap a little bit, we have if then and else. That's the logic of testing for condition or multiple conditions and then executing specified commands based on that. Again, very good if you want to try to, say, determine specific actions based on input or data that you've collected within a script or something along those lines. And then we have the loops, of course. We have the for loop, which is for iterating through a known amount, iterating through a known amount of items. Um, a good example of that in an actual script and application would be if I wanted to get a list of all Active Directory users in a Windows domain, and then I wanted to execute a command to set something for each particular user. Like, let's say I wanted to programmatically update every user's email address in their mail attribute. I might get a list of all the AD users, and then I know that every AD user's email attribute is going to be their first initial, last name, at a domain. Let's say we're changing domains or whatever. I can go ahead and take and get every user and then use a for each loop to go through every user that's in the domain and update the mail attribute for that user with the appropriate information, and I can programmatically build build that username and that domain and all of that email address and put it in there. Then we have while loops, which check for a condition upon entry. So if a condition is never met to begin with, the while loop is just skipped. But basically that just continues to execute until the condition that is set turns out to be false. Otherwise, while that condition is true, it'll continually execute that command, and at the end of executing those commands, go back up and check the condition again. Then we have the do loops, which we have do while and do until, where do while is basically do while is continue to do something again until that condition is false, and do until be used if you want to check for a condition to be true. Both of those differ from the while loops because those do a check at the end of the execution block. So they're really going to be used if you have to execute or you want to execute the code within that loop at least one time before you determine whether it needs to continue to be done. Because it's going to go ahead and just do whatever's in there, and then it's going to check at the end. And if the condition at the end is either, true or false or true, depending on whether you use while or until, it's going to go ahead and loop back up and run that code again and continue doing so until those conditions are met, again, respective to whether you use while or until. So thank you for joining me again this week. I do hope to talk to you again next week with another module, and hopefully we'll be getting into this, getting into the actual scripting example soon, which I'm sure that's what most of you actually want to see. So we're getting there, and hopefully you're finding this information useful and taking it to heart and learning something. And thank you again. Have a good week.